Wolfless Omega slipped the Alpha King a note. Your mate betrayed you, they're waiting. Mira had not always been wolfless. She remembered, faintly now, the warmth of her wolf curled inside her chest, the way it used to stir when danger was near, or when joy ran too high to hold alone. That had been before the cull, 3 winters past, when a sickness swept through the lower packs and stripped many Omegas of their second selves. Some called it a curse, others called it bad luck. Whatever it was, it left Mira hollow, in a way no healer could fix, and hollow, in a way no pack truly forgave. She had drifted from settlement to settlement after that, never welcome for long. A wolfless Omega was a strange thing to other shifters. Not quite pack, not quite outsider, treated with the kind of careful pity that stung worse than open cruelty. Eventually, she stopped looking for a place to belong, and started looking only for a place to be useful. That search brought her, in the end, to the stronghold of King Soren, ruler of the northern packs, a man known as much for his fairness as for the cold precision with which he handled threats to his throne. She took work in the kitchens. No one questioned a wolfless servant carrying trays of bread and roasted meat through the long stone halls, refilling cups at council meetings, clearing plates after feasts. People spoke freely around her, the way they might speak freely in front of a chair or a candle. She was furniture to them, and so she heard things. Most of it was harmless. Gossip about marriages, complaints about taxes, jokes about which noble had drunk too much wine the night before. But some of it was not harmless at all, and Mira had learned, over 3 years of being overlooked, exactly which conversations to remember. It started on an ordinary evening, the kind where the great hall buzzed with low conversation and the fire crackled steadily in its enormous hearth. Mira was carrying a tray of cups toward the high table when she passed close to a side alcove where Lady Ysolde, the king's mate, stood speaking with 2 visiting nobles from the eastern border packs. Mira would have walked on without a second thought, except that Ysolde's voice dropped suddenly to something sharp and urgent, and one of the nobles glanced around the room before answering in the same hushed tone. Mira slowed her steps, just slightly, just enough to catch fragments. The new moon, when the guard rotation is thinnest. He trusts no one but you to walk the east wall alone. By morning, it will already be done. She kept walking. She did not stop, did not turn her head, did not let her face show anything but the practiced blankness of a servant minding her own business. But her heart was pounding so hard she feared the nobles might hear it over their own whispering. She told herself, at first, that she might have misunderstood. Court was full of secrets, alliances being quietly built and quietly broken, marriages being arranged behind closed doors. Maybe this was simply business, nothing more. But the words stayed with her through the rest of the evening. Thinnest guard, trusts no one but you. By morning it will already be done, and the more she turned them over, the less comfortable she felt. By the time the feast ended and the hall emptied, Mira had made up her mind that she could not simply forget what she had heard. The problem was deciding what, if anything, she could do about it. She understood her position well enough to know the danger in speaking up. A wolfless Omega accusing the king's own mate of plotting against him, without proof, without standing, without a single soul in the stronghold who would vouch for her word over Ysolde's, was not a small risk. It was the kind of accusation that could see her thrown out into the snow, or worse, quietly disappeared, so that no inconvenient rumors could spread. Kings did not always reward warnings. Sometimes they punished the messenger simply for daring to deliver bad news. But she also knew what it meant to watch someone walk toward danger without a word of warning, helpless to stop it. She had lost too much already. Her wolf, her place among her own kind, the comfortable certainty of belonging somewhere. She was not willing to add a king's life to that list of things she had failed to protect, not when she might still have a chance to do something about it. So she chose a middle path. She would not stand before the king and risk her voice being doubted, dismissed, or worse. Instead, she would let a few words do the work for her, words that could plant a seed of caution without exposing her as their source. That night, while clearing the high table after the king and his court had retired, Mira tore a small corner from a scrap of parchment left near the steward's ledger. With a stub of charcoal she wrote quickly, her hand none too steady. Your mate betrayed you. They're waiting at the old watchtower, moonrise. No name, No further explanation. She folded it small and tucked it inside the linen napkin set, beside the king's customary evening cup of wine, the one his personal attendant always prepared fresh before he retired for the night. Then she went back to her small room above the kitchens, and did not sleep at all. The following evening, as was his habit, King Soren took his evening cup alone in his private study before retiring. His attendant told her, much later, that he had unfolded the napkin out of simple routine, the way a man straightens a cloth without thinking, and found the note inside. He read it once, then he read it again, more slowly. His attendant said his expression did not change much. Soren was not a man given to dramatic reactions, but something in his eyes sharpened, the way a wolf's gaze sharpens when it catches an unfamiliar scent on the wind. He said nothing about it to anyone that night. He simply finished his wine, thanked his attendant, and announced that he was retiring early, feeling unusually tired. It was, by all accounts, a perfectly ordinary thing for a king to say, and no one thought twice about it. But Soren did not go to bed. He waited until the halls had quieted, until the fires had burned low and most of the stronghold had settled into sleep, and then he slipped out a side passage rarely used, the kind of route a king learns simply by living his whole life inside the same walls. He found Ysolde leaving through the eastern gate not long after, cloaked against the night chill, moving with the quiet purpose of someone who did not wish to be seen. He followed at a careful distance, staying downwind, keeping to the shadows the way any experienced tracker would. Whatever doubts he might have carried about the note dissolved the moment he watched his own mate slip past the guards, using a route she should not have known, toward a destination she had no innocent reason to visit alone, after dark, without a word to him. The old watchtower stood at the edge of the northern woods, abandoned for years since a newer outpost had been built closer to the main road. It was exactly the kind of place chosen by people who wanted privacy and did not want to be overheard. Soren reached the tree line in time to see Ysolde meet the same two visiting nobles Mira had noticed whispering with her the evening before. He stayed hidden and listened. What he heard confirmed everything the note had warned him of, and more besides, names of others involved, the specific hour chosen for the new moon, when the eastern wall guard would be thinnest, the careful plan to have him separated from his personal guard, under some pretense Ysolde herself would arrange. It was, in its way, an almost elegant plot, built on the simple fact that no one expected betrayal from a king's own mate. Soren did not reveal himself in the woods that night. A king who confronts treason alone, in the dark, without witnesses or support, is a king who hands his enemies an easy victory. Instead, he memorized every detail he could, retraced his steps back to the stronghold before dawn, and spent the following days moving carefully and quietly to gather the proof he would need. It took the better part of 2 weeks. Soren reassigned guard rotations under reasons that seemed routine. He arranged for trusted advisors to review old correspondence between Ysolde and the Eastern Pax. He had quiet conversations with allies he trusted absolutely, the kind of people who had served his family for generations and had no reason to want him gone. Piece by piece, the plot Mira's note had warned him about took clearer shape, until there was no room left for doubt and no path left for denial. When Soren finally acted, he did so without spectacle. There was no dramatic confrontation in the Great Hall, no public shaming meant to satisfy anyone's appetite for drama. He handled the matter the way he handled most difficult things, quietly, firmly, and according to the laws that governed his packs. The nobles involved were dealt with through proper channels, their standings stripped, their lands returned to the crown. Ysolde herself was removed from the stronghold entirely, her status as his mate formally ended, the bond between them severed in the way their laws allowed, when betrayal of this kind was proven beyond doubt. It was, by any measure, a quiet resolution to what could have been a disaster. The kingdom barely noticed the shift, beyond rumors that the king's mate had been sent away for reasons no one quite understood. Soren made sure of that. He had learned long ago that a king's strength sometimes lay less in showing his enemies defeated, and more in showing his people that nothing had truly been able to shake him. But the matter of the note still sat with him, unresolved and increasingly difficult to ignore. He could not stop thinking about it. Someone in his own stronghold had known enough, and cared enough to warn him, without asking for anything in return, without even revealing themselves. In a court full of people who wanted favor, position, or influence, that kind of warning, given freely and anonymously, was almost unheard of. Soren found himself turning the mystery over and over, the way a man worries at a loose thread. He began, quietly, to investigate. He had the household staff list reviewed. He compared the handwriting on the note, small and uneven, against ledgers and records kept by various servants. He asked his attendant who had prepared his wine that particular evening, and who else might have had access to the tray before it reached him. The trail led, eventually, and somewhat unexpectedly, to Mira. He summoned her not to the great hall, where such meetings usually carried weight and formality, but to his private study, the same room where he had first read her note. She arrived nervous but composed, her hands folded carefully in front of her, clearly unsure whether she was about to be punished or simply questioned. Soren did not waste time with pleasantries. He set the small scrap of parchment on the table between them and asked her plainly whether it was hers. Mira considered lying, only for a moment, before deciding against it. She had not gone through the trouble of warning him, only to deny it now, out of fear, when the worst danger had already passed. She admitted it was hers. He asked why. Why would a servant, a wolfless omega, with no standing, no protection, and every reason to stay quiet, risk so much to warn a king she barely knew? Mira's answer was simple, and she did not dress it up with flattery or excuses. She told him that losing her wolf had cost her many things, but it had not cost her the ability to tell right from wrong. She had heard something that could get him killed, and she had decided she would rather risk his anger by speaking up than carry the guilt of his death on her conscience, knowing she could have warned him, and chose silence instead. Soren listened to all of this without interrupting, his expression unreadable in the way that had unsettled so many before her. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, simply studying her, as though trying to understand how someone with so little reason to care about him had cared enough anyway. He did not punish her, nor did he reward her with titles or sudden wealth, the kind of gestures that might have drawn unwanted attention to her or made her a target for those who resented her sudden rise. Instead, he did something far more practical. He moved her out of the kitchens and into his personal household staff, a position that kept her close enough that he could speak with her when needed, without drawing the kind of notice that might put her at risk. Over the following months, something quiet and steady began to grow between them. It was not the kind of romance built on grand declarations or sweeping gestures. It was built instead on small moments, conversations during quiet evenings, her honesty when he asked difficult questions, his patience when she struggled to trust that her place beside him was secure. Soren had spent years surrounded by people who told him what he wanted to hear, who flattered him in hopes of gaining favor. Mira had never done that. She had risked everything to tell him an uncomfortable truth, expecting nothing in return, and that single fact made her unlike anyone else in his court. In time, the elders and advisors who once might have scoffed at the idea of a wolfless omega standing close to their king found themselves reconsidering their assumptions. Mira had no wolf, no noble blood, no political alliances to offer him. What she had offered, in the end, was something far rarer in Soren's world: loyalty with nothing attached to it, given freely at a moment when it mattered most. Soren never forgot that. Long after the matter of Ysolde's betrayal had faded into old history, quietly discussed only in hushed corners of the stronghold, he remembered the small scrap of parchment that had saved his life, and the woman who had written it without ever expecting to be thanked.